Welcome to another edition of MoxieTalk, where we give you an intimate look into the courage, character, and defining moments of today's most inspiring individuals. I'm Kirt Jacobs, host of MoxieTalk, where previous guests have included leaders from the world of politics, business, culinary, sports, entertainment, art, law, community activism, and philanthropy. Today, our 374th guest in our series, we welcome Whitney Austin. She's the executive director and co-founder of the Whitney Strong organization, a nonprofit focused on responsible gun ownership and ending gun violence by taking a non-partisan approach to legislation in both Ohio and Kentucky and at the federal level by acting on data to implement educational opportunities and funding research to find science-based steps to reverse the pervasiveness of gun violence. Impassioned after surviving a September 6, 2018 mass shooting in Cincinnati, Ohio, Whitney co-founded Whitney Strong with her husband Waller. And under her leadership, Whitney Strong has executed on a number of responsible gun ownership solutions, including securing the first hearing on gun safety legislation in Frankfort in over a decade, and with a bipartisan coalition of Kentucky state senators, and joining Ohio Governor Mike DeWine to announce the Strong, and that's capital Strong, Ohio legislation, a response to the community call of, quote, do something, unquote, after the Dayton, Oregon district shooting in 2019, and distributing over 12,000 gun locks across Kentucky and Ohio, thanks to partnerships with the American Academy of Pediatrics and the support of the National Shooting Sports Foundation. And prior to her calling, Whitney was employed by Fifth Third Bank for 15 years as a vice president of digital lending as a product manager. In 2018, Whitney and her team launched the first omni-channel digital lending application in the industry. She is a wife and mother of two, and Whitney has earned both undergraduate and graduate degrees at the University of Louisville. She enjoys traveling to new locations with her family, musical theater, college basketball, and getting outdoors. Whitney, it is a true honor for you to sit with us today, and welcome to MoxieTalk to share your human journey.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. What drives you to excel in your area of expertise? I mean, you went from the banking world for all these years, and you had this moment that you didn't ask for, and it totally changed the trajectory of your life, and now you've created this nonprofit, Whitney Strong. I mean, what drives you to do all of that?
I think it's two things. I think innately I have always been an achiever. You know, everybody does the personality test at some point in their career, and the number one piece of feedback has always been that I identify as achiever. So back to being a kid, it was important to do the very best I could with everything that I do. And that has carried forward with the work of Whitney Strong. The other thing is I understand that the work I do is tied to saving lives and changing people's futures, a future free of gun violence. And so there could be nothing more important than that work, and it makes me work very hard.
Whom do you credit most influential in your life, Whitney? And it can be more than one, personal or professional.
My dad.
Okay.
My dad, for several different reasons. When, as a child and as a youth, or in my youth, Dad was always volunteering. And so Dad showed me the way to give back by example. And so that always makes Dad stand out in my mind, but also because he provided unconditional love to me. So many memories, I mean, even recent memories where Dad tells me how proud he is of me, how much he loves me, how much he supports me. And that has made me the strong woman that I am today, to have his love.
That's great. What was the most defining moment of your life, Whitney? And it can be more than one, personal or professional.
No, I think a lot of people would think I'd say September 6, 2018, and it was a very defining moment, but nothing is more defining than becoming a mother for me the first time. So in 2011, I had a baby boy.
That's
and
great.
It was the moment in which I became more compassionate, not only about his life, but about others. And also a lot of self-reflection came into play. What role do I have to make sure that he has a good life, but also that, you know, I'm doing everything possible to make sure that our country is in a good place, right? So it made me less selfish, more compassionate, more concerned about others in a way that nothing else ever did.
There's something about becoming a parent, because I had a similar experience when they handed him to me, a baby boy. Like this, something happened on the cellular level. I was not the same person the moment before to the moment after. It was
Right.
very defining. Yes, I can respect that. What do you consider to be the biggest risk you've ever taken, Whitney? And again, it could be more than one, personal or professional.
Starting Whitney Strong. I went to school. I went to business school in entrepreneurship, and I remember the entire time thinking, this is all exciting, this is all well and good, but I'm going to use this knowledge within a corporate setting. That feels much more comfortable to me. And had no intention of starting my own nonprofit or business or otherwise. And then once my life changed on September 6th, and I began to think more and more about the role that I needed to play to prevent violence in the future, it became very clear to me that I needed to use that knowledge and go out on my own with my husband and start Whitney Strong. But that was and still is a big risk. It's scary.
Sure.
And I don't think anything else could have pushed me into that other than the experience of surviving the shooting on September 6th.
Not that I think anyone could, because in the short time I've known you, you're pretty headstrong, and that's a compliment. Did anyone try to talk you out of going down that path, starting a nonprofit?
No.
Okay.
No,
Good,
I mean, the facts of what happened to me are so outrageous in a good way that no one has ever said, I don't think you should do this. It has been the exact opposite. You need to do this, and not because of you and your experience, but because of our collective experiences as Americans. Gun violence is not okay, and who is in a better position to tell their story and to try and make a difference. So it's only been support all around.
That's great. That's great. What do you consider to be the best piece of advice ever given to you, Whitney?
I love it, and it's not been one person, it's been from a many number of people, but I love it when people reframe failure instead of seeing it as a dead end and a negative. They flip it on its head and they say, and now I say, well, what do we learn from that, right? This is beneficial that we've gone down this path and we have learned that it doesn't work. So let's use that information and let's do better the next time we try. And I think if more people could reframe failure in that way, we'd be much more innovative and effective in the solutions that we're trying to pursue. But it's not commonplace, and we really need to think differently about failure.
If you don't mind, I'd like to go back to that day for the audience that might not know the story. And, you could have easily taken that morning of September 6th and framed it in your mind as a failure, like you were saying, and you didn't. Can you kind of walk through briefly those moments that kind of led up to it and then the moments after, just to give some frame of reference for the audience?
Yeah, so I was a banker and lived in Louisville, but headquarters were in Cincinnati, and went to Cincinnati regularly to work on a project that I was very proud of. And on that particular day, it was just a day trip. And so I jumped in the car at the usual hour. I kissed the kids goodbye, and I remember that they wanted a second kiss that morning, and I was rushed, but said, nope, I'll take the time, I'll give them a second kiss.
Yeah.
And then not a lot of memorable things driving up to Cincinnati.
Sure.
But then needing to jump on a conference call for work. And so as I walked onto the square, I was actively engaged in an important conference call, very focused. And I walked up to corporate headquarters and noticed that the glass in the revolving door that I usually enter was shattered, but still intact. And I thought just briefly, that's weird. Maybe somebody threw a rock at the door.
So you thought it was innocent. You didn't
Right.
think much of it.
Because I come from a privileged place. I don't know what it looks like when a bullet goes through a door. I've never seen that before, so I didn't recognize it. And instead of being cautious, I just pushed right into the revolving door, and that's when the first barrage of bullets crossed my body. Most of it was on the right side, and then across my chest. And I collapsed. I immediately thought, these are bullets. No one else is near me. These have to be bullets. And also, this has to be a mass shooting. What other explanation is there for what's happening to me? And I quickly went into survival mode. And what are my options for survival? Because I have to get home to my kids. I have to get home to my husband. But nothing worked. There wasn't anybody on the square to save me. I couldn't get up because I was so wounded. And then I tried to move my left arm to pick up the phone again to call 911, and that's when the next barrage of bullets came. And so, believe it or not, from the moment I was shot the first time to the moment Cincinnati Police Department arrived, it was only 1 minute.
Wow.
So all of these thoughts that I'm sharing with you, including the moment when nothing worked and I believed that this is the end and that I was dying, all of that happened in such a quick timeline. And so CPD arrived. They were so heroic. They did all the things right, especially in my case. And once they were able to take the shooter down is when they ran in and they pulled me out. I now know that, you know, I was in a really dangerous position where I was sitting. I was doing dangerous things like communicating with the cop, telling him, you have to save me. I have children at home. And unbeknownst to me, the shooter's behind me, tracking me. But I just felt so compelled to communicate with him and let him know that I was a mother, thinking that he would work harder to save me because I had young children who needed their mother. So he did. His name is Alfonso Staples. We're very close to this day. I love him. And he pulled me out. And things are really fuzzy from there. I ended up in the hospital. I ended up passing out at some point from all of my injuries. But when I woke up, the nurse told me, we've concluded you're a miracle. You were shot 12 times, but none of those bullets hit a major organ or artery.
Wow.
And so that's where it just all ends. You know, immediately I knew I'm going to be okay. I got something that no one ever gets, and I have to figure out how to pay this forward. And so that's when the wheels began to turn, you know, about Whitney Strong. I didn't know it was going to be Whitney Strong. I didn't know what we were going to do, but I knew that we had to do something. And my husband was right there with me on the same wavelength.
Now, you know, because someone in the audience might be perceiving this thought, so I want to put this out there and let you answer it however you see fit. But you've heard the term divine providence, where you're kind of in a position, rightly or wrongly, at the right or wrong time, and it changes the course of your destiny on earth. How do you think about all the factors, right or wrongly, if that's a word, that came into that 1 minute? How do you feel about someone that might say something like that to you?
Yeah, so I'm a person of faith, but I like to say that this question is above my pay grade. You know, I don't like to think about it in that way, because if you accept that I was saved because of some purpose here on earth, that also means that those that died that day and have died before me didn't have a purpose.
Exactly.
And I can't reconcile that. But what is crystal clear is that I was given this amazing gift. And so the responsibility that comes with that is really important. And so I need to pay it forward. And maybe someday I'll get a chance in heaven to ask why. But until then, I'm not thinking about that anymore, because I don't think there are any answers that I'll get here.
Do you ever feel like you're misunderstood?
Yeah, I think in the work of Whitney Strong, which, to be clear, is rooted in common ground and focused on responsible gun ownership, but there is inherently, for a lot of people, a belief that if you choose to pursue this work, which is trying to prevent gun violence, that you are also inherently anti-gun. And that's not me at all. That's not my husband at all. In fact, share regularly that we are gun owners. This is not about that at all, right? The Second Amendment is important to this country and to us. What we are trying to do is to end gun violence, not gun ownership. And so,
it's a good
as
distinction.
much as possible, I want to correct that inaccuracy.
So in a perfect world, whether it's America or, you know, the planet Earth, what looks like gun ownership to you?
I think that there is a lot of responsibility that comes with being a gun owner. It is a very lethal weapon. And so for me, what gun ownership in a better place could look like in America is that we all take that ownership responsibly, or we take that responsibility seriously. And so for me, what does that look like? It looks like training, right? Required training. So if you are going to own a gun, what is the minimum number of hours that are required so that you can be skilled with it? And it doesn't matter whether you're using it for sport, if you're using it for hunting, if you're using it for self-protection. Let's take that responsibility seriously and let's log some hours to make sure that we are trained in a way that is appropriate. The second thing I think that comes along with that is making sure that we all comprehend the importance of safe storage when a firearm is not in use. I share often that gun locks can universally prevent all forms of gun violence, whether it's a youth, someone young, gaining access to a firearm for school shootings, whether it is someone who has suicidal thoughts that doesn't need easy access to a firearm, or even the violent crime that we're seeing in our city that is happening simply because that gun was stolen and now the criminal has access to it. So we all need to rethink our role as firearm owners, and I think it goes back to training and safe storage.
What is it like to be Whitney Austin? And you can interpret it, post the shooting or pre or maybe both.
Yeah, I am a very serious person. I was a serious little kid and I'm a serious adult. And you can imagine that after going through what I did and feeling so strongly that I have a role to play in making this better for others, that has only become more intense. And so I don't know that it would be fun for most people to be me, because I'm constantly thinking about how can we approach this issue differently, what's a new angle for making progress, and really turning it off. I do my best to turn it off when my children are around, because I want to give them the gift of being a good mother, but it really gets turned off. I constantly think about it and I take it very seriously. So that's what it's like.
Well, you're to be commended for doing that, because not a lot of people having equally the same experience would have done that, in my opinion, as a fellow human. They would have taken the path more traveled, which is probably anonymity, and just kind of faded away and gone about their life. But you chose a path of Moxie, frankly, and that's why you're on the program. So when was the aha moment? Maybe not necessarily Whitney Strong, or maybe so. Was it literally there in the hospital bed, or was it kind of an evolution over months of talking to several people? Or you strike me as one, I don't want to answer it for you.
Yeah, no,
But
it was immediate. It was even before the hospital. When I was, while I was being shot actively in the midst of that, one of the thoughts that crossed through my mind after recognizing that it was a mass shooting was, and you've done nothing to stop this. Why? Why would you think it would never happen to you? Because that's what I thought. And that's what likely everyone who will watch this will think. That will never happen to me.
Right.
And so it was in that moment of also thinking, how can I live? Am I going to live? Saying a prayer that if I get out of this situation, I'm going to finally do something about this. And then it was solidified with the news from the nurse, which was, you've survived 12 bullets. And I didn't know what it would turn into, but I knew it would come.
So, you don't have to go into detail, but there's no permanent, you're pretty well healed, and which is even as miraculous as surviving, I think. Because I would not know if I didn't know your backstory. You don't have any physical.
There are so many blessings in my life from surviving the shooting, and one of them is physically things are not all that different. There are some issues here or there. I always share that I can't. This is called supination, and you better believe I spent more than a year of serious physical and occupational therapy to be able to do this, but it's not as natural as this.
I see. Do you write right-handed?
I do, and I couldn't do any of that for months. So some things are physically different, but everything that I need to do in life, I can. And just another reason to be grateful. I have a board member at Whitney Strong who was shot twice, and he is in a wheelchair. And so add it to the list of things I cannot reconcile and why I have to do this work.
Now, I've got some pictures here. I call this the fun dessert part, if you will, of the Moxie Talk. So did you come up with the Whitney Strong logo?
No, I love it, but this was in the phase of I can't write, I can't text, I can't even use my hands. And so friends from business school came together and designed that for me. And I'll never forget seeing the pink and thinking, I love pink. This is perfect.
Yes, it's great. I love that. And then I'm going to read this. This is a quote of yours. I cannot give up because it is tough work, and there will be many people that give up, but not the girl who got shot 12 times. I will never forget, and I will never give up. Executive Director of Whitney Strong, Whitney, Austin. I love that. That's why I wanted to share it with the group. This is you now, but this is you the day of.
Yeah.
And what was going through your mind? You've kind of touched upon it, but
I think at that point I was asleep. My husband took that picture. I think it was also before I heard the news that I was going to be okay. Up until that moment, before I passed out, what was going through my mind was, to anyone that would look me in the eye, you have to save me. I'm a mother. I have a 5 and a 7-year-old, and they need me. You have to save me. And in my head, I thought, if I tell people that over and over again, they'll fight harder to save me, because nobody wants children left without a mother. And I now know that's a ridiculous thought. Everybody in the hospital bent over backwards to do everything they could to help me. Same thing with the police officers and the EMS. But my brain said, give them something they'll care about, and that'll get me through it.
Exactly. Well, to me, it's a very angelic picture. You know, it's got all this darkness and beauty in it. It's just a remarkable picture that he took. So.
It's also interesting that we don't have very many pictures of that period. I wish we would have taken more, but there are only a few. And I think that speaks to how grateful we were. We were just in this bubble of gratitude that this thing happened.
Now you're on the circuit. It looks like this is an event.
Yeah, so that was the moment where Strong Ohio was announced, which was a 17-point plan for gun violence prevention for the state of Ohio. And it was done in a bipartisan way with leaders like Governor DeWine and Mayor Nan Whaley. And when I look at that, I mainly think, wow, that was such a big moment. But I didn't know then, because it was all so new.
Yeah, sure. Here you are with Senator McConnell.
Yeah, I have been given the greatest opportunity to meet with the highest leaders in our country, and for them to be good listeners. And so that's what I think about.
And here you are with McGarvey, I believe, Senator McGarvey.
Yeah, that's the tag team right there. That's Senator McGarvey and Senator Hornback, one Republican, one Democrat. They are the sponsors of our bill here in Kentucky, crisis aversion and rights retention, and they are special. They are doing something that is not happening across the country. They're saying we can come together and we can pursue a solution to reduce gun violence.
And here you are speaking with Congressman Yarmouth. And
yeah, that was at a town hall for gun violence prevention. Just another really great opportunity where I get to share with people my story.
And this looks like your posse, your group.
That's the Whitney Strong board.
It's great.
Yep, they're wonderful. Really a great group of dedicated, skilled people that care like I do.
Well, thank you for sharing that. Now, without naming names, politicians, you know, their agendas and motivations can always not sync up with your own, whatever that might be. Do you find most of them receptive, or do you find some interesting pushback? I'm just kind of curious what kind of headwinds you're facing, or has it been more well received, if you will, or embraced?
You know, I say everybody wants gun violence reduced.
Sure.
That's not unique to a political party, but what differs is their view on what solutions will actually work. As far as who is receptive, it runs the gamut.
Sure.
Had plenty. In fact, most meetings are really good. They're willing to open their ears and listen to what I have to say. There are some that refuse to meet with me, and I think that's unfortunate, but that's their prerogative.
Okay.
So I don't have trouble generally getting people to listen to me. We're in the let's do something about it phase
Sure.
that I'm working really hard on.
And I'm curious because someone might have this thought in the audience. Basically, Whitney Strong is based in Kentucky and Ohio. Its
Right.
focus. Why is that?
Well, as an achiever over here, we will go national at some point, but you have to start somewhere. And when we were thinking about the states that we cared most about, I live in Kentucky and will always care about Kentucky, but Cincinnati became my second home as an employee of Fifth Third Bank. I mean, more than a decade of travel to and from Cincinnati. And because the shooting happened in Cincinnati, there was so much support and passion around change. And so we decided early on that we would focus on Ohio and Kentucky.
Okay. Can you define leadership in one word in the great English lexicon, as I like to say? And it can be more than one. It could be a phrase, if you like.
Perseverance.
Yeah, that fits you to a T, I think.
I have a strong connection to that word. It goes way back. And I think it's just a benefit that I learned a long time ago how to persevere. Because you need perseverance if you are going to fight to reduce gun violence.
If you could tell someone what's the single most positive contribution you've made to humanity, what might that be? It's a pretty frothy question, but we ask all our guests that question.
It's starting Whitney Strong
Sure.
and doing the work of Whitney Strong. You know, I can give you examples here or there. Just last week, there was an article published on the work of our bill, crisis aversion and rights retention, and we threw in that, hey, separately, if anybody is interested in free gun locks because you want to start safely storing, reach out. And I had two gentlemen reach out and say, I'm no longer going to accept that I just keep this in the closet or I keep it in the drawer when the kids are over. Can you please send them over? And I'm happy to distribute them in my neighborhood. And I know that may not seem like a lot to some people, but oh my goodness, it was the best news of the month that these two men were going to change their behavior. And they understood the important role safe storage plays in keeping all of us safe. So that's just one story of many that come because of the work of Whitney Strong.
So if someone were to ask you, what is your why, Whitney? In other words, what motivates you? Why are you doing all this? I mean, more or less.
Goes back to that question of being unable to reconcile why I got to go home to my kids on September 6th. And I think because of my father's role in teaching me about volunteerism, et cetera, there was always a seed within me that needed to be watered to care a lot about others and about our country. And then September 6th happened. So it was solidified in that moment.
So when things get tough, and you've kind of talked about it earlier, you know, it's hard to turn your brain off at night. You know, it's always on your mind, you know, and when you're running on empty, as I call it, how do you keep going? How do you push through?
It's the same answer.
Really? I know, but
It always goes back to, oh my goodness, look what I got. Look what I got. I don't know how else to see it, how to view it. I have to pay this gift forward.
If you could change one thing in your own life or in general, what might that be?
Yeah, this one probably feels more trivial compared to everything else we've talked about, but believe it or not, I love singing and dancing and musical theater. I played the flute, I sang, I danced, I did all that stuff. And the one thing that I gave up on out of everything else was piano. And so now as I sit down with my daughter who takes piano lessons, or my son plays violin, or I want us all to sing, like, oh, if I could just pick the piano back up and I could play this song, I could play and we could all sing. And I gave up in 5th grade, and it's really the only thing of significance that I gave up. So I have a regret that I did that.
Well, you know, there's more chapters, you never know.
No, that's true.
You
I
know,
could pick it
you
back
could,
up.
I mean, and with them playing, there's a certain influence in the household, so you never know, right? What do you consider to be your biggest pet peeve?
Ooh.
You know, the one thing, it can be more than one, you know, that just makes your skin crawl or whatever, it just kind of totally changes your mood. Like you can be totally great mood and, you know, it changes it.
I do not like wasting time. I never have, and I think after surviving
Sure.
the shooting and knowing that life is fragile even more. So I don't want to waste time. So if I'm in a meeting and we're talking about things that aren't relevant, or I'm
I hear you.
witnessing some things that happen in government, I don't like any of it.
A meeting
Let's
about the
get
meeting.
let's get the job done.
Right. I got you. Could you describe in particular detail a scenario or incidents where you utilized your own philosophy on leadership?
This one's personal, but laid the foundation for why perseverance is important to me. When I was in middle school and a dancer, I wanted more than anything to be on the dance team. And that was not only because I thought I was talented enough, because also in middle school, social status is tied to things like that.
Good point.
And so I tried out in 6th grade and I did not make it. I tried out in 7th grade, did not make it. All of my friends I danced with that were a year younger made it. And then I came back again and tried in 8th grade and I finally made it. And that's not where the story ends.
Okay.
Then I go to high school, male high school, amazing dance team. I want to be on the dance team again. So I try out freshman year. I don't make it. I try out sophomore year. I don't make it.
Oh, no.
All of my friends that are freshmen dancers
Sounds like
make
a
it.
theme here.
Junior year, I make it as an alternate, which took about a month or so before I was finally really on the team. And then senior year, made it outright. And so that may sound really trivial to some people, but when your life and your self-worth is tied to something like that, and you fail and you fail and then you get it, and then you fail and you fail and you fail and then you get it, it was defining. And that's a good thing, because it is not easy to be in this space of trying to reduce gun violence for all the reasons. And so.
And it's all relative, what you're talking about, your age and social status and how important it is at that particular juncture in your life. I appreciate you sharing that. What does Whitney Austin stand for? In other words, what would you tell them, not how they may perceive you, a stranger watching this? What would you tell them you stand for?
I hope I stand for bringing people together, whether it's differences people have on gun violence or otherwise. We have way too many opportunities today to prioritize what we do not have in common. And back to me not liking wasting time. All that does is waste time and prevents us from making progress on the many issues our country has. And so we all have something in common with that person who is different from us. You just need to find it and prioritize it. So I hope that people see me in that way, as a unifier.
Do you think there's a difference in today's nonprofit leaders than, say, in the 20th century, in your experience creating Whitney Strong? I guess the way I would look at it is, could you have achieved in the short amount of time what you've done now? And there's a lot more to do, of course. If this had happened in, say, the 1980s or the 1990s, I don't know if you've ever thought about it in that context.
I'd say no, because of advancements in technology. You know, so much of what we are able to do in a very quick way is because of the resources surrounding us. So I'd say no. It doesn't mean that people weren't successful back then, but you know, I need something. There's an app for it. So I think we live in a world of technology, and because of that, we are able to move so much more quickly.
You brought a object with you that I
Yeah.
like to say captures your essence. If you could hold that up and share it with the audience and maybe read it and explain why.
Yeah, this is a card that I got after I made the announcement that I was going to leave the bank and do Whitney Strong full time, which was about 10 months after the shooting. And the card says, "I am not afraid. I was born to do this." And it came from one of my very best friends who is still employed at Fifth Third Bank. And you know, it was a moment of encouragement because I was doing something that I was afraid of, taking this big risk for not only me, but for my family to step away from the career that I had known for 16 years and to also put a stake in the ground to say, I think we can do this differently. I think we can make progress on this issue when up until this point, very little progress had been made. And so in my gut, I knew it was going to be okay and that this was the right thing to do. But this card was just it was sentimental to me. It is sentimental to me now. It was sentimental to me then. And so it's just a reminder. It sits on my bulletin board.
I was going to ask you, is
and
it
I'll
visible?
look at it from time to time. And he was right. The card is right. I was born to do this. And so I'm going to keep doing it.
So that's a good segue into this next question. If you could have written a note to the younger Whitney Austin, a note to self, what would you have told her?
Well, that Whitney Austin who wasn't making the dance team and had every reason to believe that, I was weird or I was different, not popular, all of those things, I would say, you're great as you are. Everybody is unique, everybody is special, and embrace that and be proud of that, because what the future holds for you is so special. So I would try to instill more confidence in that Whitney and help that Whitney be proud of who she was, things that I now know as a 40-year-old, but couldn't possibly comprehend back then.
The most successful people, in my opinion, of course, are those that lead authentic lives. They're very self-aware and very honest, and that's not always fun. They accept their limitations and they emphasize their strengths, and that's what gets a lot of them in the chair here. So I appreciate you sharing that. So this is a fun question. If you could, let's say the board of Whitney Strong says, you've done so great, get lost for 2 weeks, 14 calendar days, 10 business days, money's no object, hopefully you don't take technology with you. Where do you go? Who do you take with you? What do you do?
My family, the 4 of us, and we would go to a place where you can't even use technology, even if you have it, which, in case you don't know, go deep into national parks or go deep into state parks. And a lot of times there is no coverage, or deep into Montana for that matter. And so we would go into the woods. Something that we started to do in the last couple of years is explore national parks, and we just love it. There's nothing like being removed from technology, focusing on each other as a family, and taking in the beauty of our earth. Oh my goodness, there are so many beautiful parts of our country, and if you can just sit with it, you're inspired to go back home and work hard again to help others.
Great. That's one of the most authentic answers. We usually get the beach and take a book, or no family. I want totally no distraction.
Yeah, you also have to be up for roughing it a bit.
Yes.
Don't love that part.
No glamping, in other words.
Right.
I got you. So this is our signature question. Nobody gets out of the hot seat, the guest seat, the rocket seat, however you want to call it, without asking this question. But came very close on September 6, 2018, but if God forbid you were to walk out of the studio, it was to all end today. How do you want to be remembered? Mainly by your family, friends, colleagues at Fifth Third, other people that are, assuming nothing happens, which I don't think it will, that you've yet to touch. How do you want to be remembered?
I want to be remembered as someone who loves others. I think that's what drives the work of Whitney Strong. That's what drives my role as mother, as friend, and the more we all prioritizing loving one another, the closer we get to solving many of the problems we have as a country.
Well, I'm humbled and honored you came on MoxieTalk.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much for being here. Keep up the great work. I appreciate it. If you've been inspired by today's discussion, feel free to email me at kirt@moxietalk.com. And if you'd like to learn more of our interviews or have a guest suggestion, just type in MoxieTalk with Kirt Jacobs. We're all over the internet and all the major social media platforms. Until next time, I'm Kirt Jacobs. Thanks for watching.